Okay.
No risk involved, right?
No.
Nothing bad's going to happen.
Nobody's going to. So, take it away.
Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast is a co-production of Verso Studios and the incredible new Westport Library with me, Trace Burroughs.
And me, Miggs Burroughs. And I'm going to start off with a very cheesy poem. Our guest today loves writing haiku, and it is our pleasure to bring her to you. She is Westport's poet laureate and will be telling us the story of it. So, Diane Lowman, how do you do?
I thought you were going to say story.
Can we have a round of applause?
Ooh, what else rhymes? Give me credit. What else rhymes with laureate?
Oh, my God. You got me there. I don't think anybody's ever written a poem for you before. Very tickled. That was I may just keep that. Very cool.
So
I'll
is
have
that
to
called
think about that laureate
doggerel? What is doggerel? Isn't that like bad poetry? Doggerel, or I don't know. I should have let it
I
up.
have to look that up now.
I don't know why.
Oh, two things I didn't notice.
It's the word doggerel. Anyway, Diane Lowman is Westport's official poet laureate, our first.
Yeah.
Are there other towns that have poet laureates?
There are 27, soon to be 28 towns in Connecticut that do. Ridgefield is just in the process of selecting one. But there's a Connecticut poet laureate who's actually coming to town in June to Earth Place, and 7 others. Yeah, there's a coalition of Connecticut state poet laureates. If you can believe it.
Are you all going to get together and
We have.
Do you?
do a poet off?
Yes.
A rhyme off.
A slam, literally.
A slam.
Smackdown, poet smackdown.
Or just smack. You
Yeah.
just smack each other.
Can't imagine what that would look like. Poets throwing words at each other. I don't know. Yeah.
What do you? I mean, is it collegial? Is it kind of competitive? Is it like, I'm
Catty?
Yeah, no. I mean, anything but. They were super welcoming when I thought like there'd be some initiation, like, fraternity hazing or something. And I had to define doggerel and come up with something that rhymed with laureate, She failed. But they sort of send emails out about events. They will promote events for you. We all got invited up to Hartford and got certificates from the Senate for being poet laureates, and so it's actually a very sweet group. There's one from Milford coming down to read in Westport in a couple weeks.
No, I should know because I was on the committee that nominated you or
that's
whatever,
right.
but I wasn't in the weeds of it.
In the trenches.
But what were the qualifications or the requirements?
So it's funny. I felt like it was like a college application. There was a personal essay and sort of a resume with your experience, two letters of recommendation. Yes, it was, and then interviews. So it was a pretty rigorous process. The joke, I was so delighted when I found out I got it, and the joke in my family was no one else applied. Because saying congratulations, you were probably the only one. I was like, well, thank you for that glowing support, and
So how do you know what to do how do you?
Yeah, what's your duty?
You study?
Are they defined? Do they define your?
I have no clue.
Oh.
Yeah, I have no clue. It's definitely making it up as I go along, because the committee was great about sort of stating their goals. Their goals were to create community through poetry. But then one thing that they asked during the interviews, well, how would you do that? And I didn't really know what a poet laureate did. I'm not quite sure that I do. Every time someone says, what do you do? I'm like, I don't know, whatever I feel like. Really.
Well, that's it. You made it your own.
I'm making it up. But I mean, that was one of the things in the interview that we talked about, is how do you see poetry, and how do you see it creating community, and what kind of things would you like to do? So the next poet laureate of the town might do it very differently, and that's great, right? They should, whoever does it should make it theirs. I don't know what others do. I mean, it would be interesting to get together with the coalition and find out, well, like, what's a sort of day-to-day, month-to-month thing for you? But I really am just winging it, and it's so much fun.
You get paid?
No.
No, it's honorary. No, which is wonderful, because I know you're at a lot of places and you volunteer to be places, and it's really a great addition to. Now, one thing you do is, I have one question first. Is there a limerick laureate anywhere?
It's funny. I'm going to have to find out all the answers, and then you're going to have me back.
Sure.
Because
yeah.
I haven't.
Because I would apply for that job.
I haven't heard of one, and most of the other poets write sort of free verse or some write sonnets. I'm not aware of another haiku one, and certainly not of a limerick one, but I'll bet they have written them.
It's probably just too hard to say limerick laureate.
Yeah.
But anyway. Yeah. So your
it's
specialty
a good alliteration.
is haiku. So haiku, so explain for most of us who don't know what haiku is. What is it?
So it's a pretty ancient Japanese poetry form that in American translation, and it is all in translation, so it's not exactly how it appeared in Japan originally, but it's a 3-line, 17-syllable form. So it's 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And historically, they were about nature, kind of observing the sky and cranes flying. But of course, now and here, westernized and modernized, they're kind of all bets are off, and I see a lot of haiku that doesn't even fit into the 5-7-5, which is fine. There's kind of no rules in poetry.
Yeah, but then it's not a haiku.
Right. And for me, it provides structure.
Yeah. It's like, we're serving sushi, but it's fried.
Chicken, right? Yeah. It's fried chicken.
It's fried chicken, we're calling it.
It's spaghetti with meatballs, right? Yes. But we're calling it sushi. It's wrapped in seaweed. Exactly. I mean, for me, it's like a discipline, getting it into that format.
And in the sense of art, we have to do something within a frame and limitations of the medium.
Right. If you're using a camera, right, there's things you can do, you can't do, depending on, exactly. I mean, it is a discipline. I mean, I'm really not a poet by originally or by nature. I write creative nonfiction. And you may know this, but my oldest son, Dustin, is doing an MFA in poetry at the Art Institute of Chicago. And when I sent him a couple of my poems way, way, way back, I took a stab at it, and he very kindly said to me, "Mom, these suck. Don't write poetry anymore." Excuse me. He said, "Just stop. Go back to your creative nonfiction. Stick with what you know." So I started the haiku because they were short and condensed, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to get too epic and sonnets and so that's where that was born, and I think I have almost 2,000 of them now.
Wow. So you're really into Shakespeare, I read.
I love Shakespeare.
So how did you probably obviously read all the plays.
I have. I have read them all at least 3 times, some of them more. The ones that I had to write papers for. I cannot remember. People ask, when and how it started. I remember reading Romeo and Juliet, probably 9th grade, and at some point I became obsessed, like crazy obsessed, and read them through college and would go to see whatever production I could see. And then after the kids left home and I was sort of bored and wondering what to do next, excuse me, I decided if I were really a Shakespeare fan, I had to read all 38 of them. And then I blogged about each one. It was like an assignment, and that took 3 years. And then when they were really out of the house, I ran away from home and went to Stratford-upon-Avon and did an MA in Shakespeare Studies for 13 months.
Yeah,
just
I remember
a couple of years ago.
reading Shakespeare in 9th grade, and I was like
and?
Totally lost.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a good teacher.
Easy guy.
You need a good teacher to explain the word. It's like poetry, I guess, right? And I mean, the way he talks about something I didn't understand. I was like totally in the dark.
And that's interesting. Was that the language of the day, or is that his particular? Is that what makes him great? Is that he kind of invented this way of communicating?
Yeah, both.
Yeah, people didn't speak like that on the street.
They didn't speak like that on the street, but the language was very much of the day, so it would have been easier to understand. But he wrote a lot in iambic pentameter, a lot of verse. Excuse me. So. The answer is really yes to both, but your point about it's a lot like poetry. I mean, some of it is poetry, but the way I feel about poetry comes from how I feel about Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare was intended originally for people that came to the Globe and threw apples and tomatoes and poured beer all over each other, right? It's not a highbrow thing. And I think poetry is sort of the same way. It's storytelling. It's communicating in fact, literally was communication, because it's easier to remember something in verse. It's like songs. I can remember Build Me Up Buttercup, but I can't tell you like the person I met yesterday what their name is. But ask me to sing Build Me Up, I don't. But
no, that's right.
But so I think they're both meant to be accessible and unifying, rather than, you need 6 degrees to read this play and it's only for special. It's not. It's the common person. So that's what I want to do with poetry, is make it not scary, accessible. Not elite, but accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what is a sonnet? Is there a definition of a sonnet?
14 lines,
okay.
Yeah. And iambic pentameter, rhyming couplets. The first, 12 lines are rhyming couplets. And then the end, I'm not sure I got that right, but the end two are sort of like with haiku, where the last line is often sort of the punchline. The last two are sort of like the message. So Shakespeare's a big sonnet guy. And we actually have someone called the Sonnet Man.
Really?
Coming in May.
Oh.
I met him in Stratford. He's a Brooklyn-based rapper and decided that he wanted to make Shakespeare accessible. So he raps the sonnets. Oh. And he goes all over the country to inner city schools.
He doesn't change the words. He just raps the sonnets.
Straight up. I just saw one. I just saw one on YouTube that I posted on Facebook, and his name is Devon Glover. He'll be here May 17th. He's amazing. Another way to kind of get it out. Yeah.
So what's your take on, there's been controversy, did Shakespeare really write everything?
Yes.
And what's the scoop?
So the answer to that is sort of yes, like with was that the language of the day, and there's a really strong feeling among the academics that I worked with in Stratford. It was the Shakespeare Institute, that this nonsense that it was Francis Bacon or it was really a woman, or that's all crap. Right? Am I allowed to say that? Sure. I just did. I could have said something worse.
Yeah. It's Shakespearean.
But, however, yes, I could have come up with he's got a couple good insults. Right? But playwriting and theater in his time was very different. It was all collaborative. So it's very unlikely, and we when I say we, the sort of Shakespeare academia has a pretty good idea of which ones he wrote alone, from language and rhythm and patterns. Most of them he collaborated with people on. So, I'd say probably a third. I'd probably get scolded if I didn't get that right. Maybe a third fully he didn't do alone. But then when you know that, it's really obvious when you see his bits. They're better. Like Fletcher and Beaumont and Christopher Marlowe, and so there are a lot of different people that contributed.
They did it in those days. Would they have like a writer's room where they would just sit there and with their quill pen, or would Shakespeare write something and messenger it to, send it on horseback to somebody, and they would
I wish we knew, right? I think it's more the former. I think they sat together in a room by the theater with the actors right there, because Shakespeare owned the company that he worked for, part owner. And I think literally they were working the plays out, and they were like, no, Romeo's got to say something better, like King Lear has to look a little more miserable than he's looking right now. Take his, And so I think they fed them, they kind of edited and wrote. And there was also a lot of influence from, we can't say that in front of the Queen, or King James would be upset. So I think things were very interactive,
Now, who, was he, what do they call them? Not prodigies, but, when you're writing at the request of, was he writing for the
yes. I think, and again, there's so much, sadly, that we don't know. They're always trying to sort of figure new things out, and we always hope somebody will discover something, but there's pretty limited information. But we do absolutely know that Queen Elizabeth really enjoyed the theater, so she would have them come in, and there's, conjecture about plays that, like Merry Wives, we think that they wanted something funny sort of in between all the Henrys and misery and tragedy and
suicides,
everybody dying, and and Macbeth was sort of right after she died, and James came in, and it's about Scotland, where he was from, and he believed heavily in witches. So there's lots of witches in Macbeth. So yeah, I think they definitely knew their audience, or kind of writing things they thought they would like. Yeah, for sure.
Do you have a second favorite writer?
James Joyce. Big Ulysses fan, yeah. Just the light stuff,
Yeah,
sort of like night table reading, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so difficult to
overwhelming.
get to. I mean, it is probably like Trace said. It's the teacher has a lot to do with it, because if they can guide you into it and make it accessible and make it kind of contemporize it or somehow relate it, but it was all like, just read this, and it was like, it was hard to get through.
Which is like an awful way to present it.
Yeah.
Because it really is, just like Shakespeare, it's amazing, but you're absolutely right. You cannot hand a kid Ulysses and say, here, report on the first 3 chapters tomorrow. There's no way. Mostly it's about language, but I went to Cambridge the year after Shakespeare and had an amazing Cambridge professor, and that was the 3rd time I'd read through it, but the best time, because he really did. It was like a roadmap. And then, so like the sky opened up and angels were singing. Oh, he came out of the grave and stuff. But, it absolutely makes a huge difference. Yeah. Yeah.
So before you got into this poet laureate, you worked on a container ship?
I did when I was long before. Yeah, I was 19 years old. So it was between sophomore and junior year of college.
And how many months on a ship would you be?
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
From New York to Australia, New Zealand, and back through the Panama Canal. German container ship, 32 German soldiers.
So you don't get seasick at all?
You know what? I don't get seasick unless I'm on a small boat.
Right.
I can't go out on a sailboat.
Was there a lot of, heavy lifting? And what was
No, it was sort of a favor to a neighbor, better than sort of working at Arby's, which is what my option would have been. They said, do you want to work on a ship? And I'm thinking like Love Boat, I'm Julie with the clipboard and cocktails with umbrellas. And good thing I didn't know what I was getting into probably, but I figured it was better than staying home in suburbia. And so it was sort of a favor. They kicked the 3rd officer out. I later realized I got his cabin, which did not make me friends. I would get up at 5:30 to clean the bridge before the captain reported. After that, I'd set up the officers' mess for each meal. Then mended linens for better parts of the morning. Swabbed the decks, literally swabbed the decks. But they didn't have that much for me to do. I was usually done by noon. And I think the crew also resented that, because it was like this, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was doing a much easier job than they were.
Mostly men on the ship?
All men, except for the one of the cook's wives was a stewardess, and one of the engineers had a wife. Literally, this is going to sound bad and sexist. I don't mean it that way, because it literally happened that he picked up in Brazil on a shore leave, and we didn't see much of her. She kind of stayed in her cabin. Yeah. And she only spoke Brazilian, Portuguese, not even German, no English. So she kept to herself.
Was that challenging with all the men?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. My father, the look in my father's eyes when we walked up, I always call it the gangplank, which obviously it's not what it was, but when we walked up to get on the ship, I'll never forget the look in his eyes. It was sort of like, what did I get this girl into? I think vicariously he thought it would be a great idea. We did have the assurance of the agent, the shipping agent, that everything would be okay. And I think the captain had read them the riot act before I got on board, because they were mostly polite. But it was really, there was no internet. There was no, I couldn't, to call them cost $80 and you couldn't hear them anyway. And so I had no communication for 10 weeks.
Could you get off the ship at different ports?
I did.
And you were allowed
Sydney,
to get off?
Melbourne, Brisbane, Dunedin, Wellington, Auckland, and New Zealand. Yeah. But container ships load and unload very quickly. So that was maybe 10 days off the ship out of 10 weeks. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
when I was 19, I drove my motorcycle to Montreal to get on to work on a container ship to get to London, and I was rejected.
Why?
I don't know. I just wasn't. I mean, I wasn't recommended by anybody. I was told, this is one of those, before the internet, but it was the same kind of rumor that, all you do is jump a ship, jump a freighter.
But you can't. People do this.
Well, I went to the ports in Montreal, and I went from ship to ship to ship, and all these container ships, some were freighters, some were whatever they were, and I just said, I want to work my way over to Southampton or wherever, and I guess maybe didn't look like I could. Wasn't strong enough or big enough. I don't know. It's just so I spent a week in Montreal and drove back home. But.
Well, the good news is you could do it now.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's called. There's actually a name for it. It's called a workaway rather than a stowaway.
Oh, okay.
And many of the lines, and that's actually the intent of the position, is that people that want passage and room and board. If you want to get to Australia or England or somewhere, and you don't have the money, you work. And they picked up a couple on the way back who were true workaways, and they worked. I mean, they painted the ship with everybody, and they did some very heavy lifting. But I know people that have done it now, like on the St. Lawrence, and so something to think about.
Yeah.
You might want to go on the internet first this
was,
time.
Yeah, but it was such a romantic notion
right.
at the time, and maybe it was for you too. But.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reality was a little different, but I'm glad I did it.
Any storms? I mean, any treacherous situations?
Mostly good. On the way back from New Zealand, the North Pacific looked stormy, so the captain took a more southerly route, and that ended up being worse. And there were I can literally see this now, sort of 8,000 years later, where we'd sit in the ship, and normally there was there's that nice sort of rocking. This was such that when it would go list to one side, all I could see was the water. And then it would list to the other side, and all you could see was way up to the sky. And that just went on for days and days. And then the boiler broke. And so, normally the forward motion sort of helps to cut some of so there was no forward motion. So it was just this
just a
bathtub.
A cork in the
awful
ocean. Wow.
Yeah, those were not happy days. And they wanted to put me in the boiler because
they were punishing you.
Yeah, it was like Hansel and Gretel.
They
Come
ran
here,
out of
little
wood.
girl. Yeah,
they ran out
yeah, just peeking a little further because I was smaller than most of the people on board, and so they had drained it and thought. It called me out of the mess hall at one point, and they were like, would you want to do that? And I said, well, no, hell no, I don't want to know, And they were like, oh, it's fine, you don't have to. But I had visions of.
Well, you had to do some repairs in there because you were.
They wanted me to, but I said I wouldn't go in. I was like, no, I draw the line there.
So what do you do for entertainment on a ship? I mean, do they have TV or?
They had rented movies. So they had movie night once a week. Wednesday night was movie night.
And
most
somebody
of them
picked the movies.
Well, they would have brought them before on board.
Yeah.
So they had Bruce Lee movies, but dubbed in German.
Oh, that'd be funny.
So I would just go to watch them.
Yeah.
But most of them were dubbed in German. They had a canteen night twice a week, so I would work that. People could get cigarettes and Holsten beer. They had a holding area in the bottom of the ship that was, it was huge, that had nothing but cases of Holsten beer. And so we would sell that. They had barbecues on board. Sure. They had, they smoked a lot, which seemed like a dumb thing to do on a ship, but somebody taught me how to navigate by the stars. Yeah. And they still did that.
So the other thing you've become known for is this haiku on demand.
Yeah.
So how does that work? And can we demand a haiku?
Absolutely. Yes, you have absolutely done that right. My motto with this whole poet laureate thing is I say yes to as much as I can. So if somebody asks for something, I say yes. So I don't know if you've seen on the streets of New York, or I've seen them in many big cities where there are these sort of lonely looking poets sitting there with very old typewriters like Nina uses, and and they do it for money. You know, you can come up to them, and I did it in London once and say, you know, I want a poem about sushi, and they'll kind of type one out for you. So I thought, well, that would be a neat thing to do. And the haiku, it's much quicker, right? So I've been doing that at different, as you know, thank you for including me in the holiday party, different events. So somebody will, I usually say, tell me something you're thinking about, obsessed with, angry about, happy about, you know, someone you love, someone you hate, the first word that pops into your mind. And then I'll write one. And it's amazing because it turns out to be very sort of half confessional, half therapy. You know, sometimes they're funny. Like somebody did ask for a sushi poem.
Did they really? Oh.
Yeah. But then oftentimes you'll sort of get like, gosh, my dog just died, or I've just left my husband, or yeah, you know, and so I feel very honored actually to be asked.
Right.
Can you make up one now if I throw a word at you?
Yeah, tell me a word. And then you'll have to
Can
talk
it be
amongst
2 words,
yourselves.
like just an idea?
Yeah, and then you'll have to talk amongst yourselves,
sure. For the next hour.
Yeah, I'll be back. I'll be back next week.
Make one up about an evil clown.
Okay.
So
I'm not trying to be challenging.
No, that's great. That's great.
We're vamping. I'll just ask straight. Have you ever written poetry? Even in grade school, did you have to write poems or anything?
You know, like, because they always ask you to write a poem. So I don't remember what that was like, but I mean, I write lyrics now to songs, and that's like poetry.
Yeah, that's true.
It's got, well, it doesn't. I know poetry doesn't have to rhyme. Lyrics are usually better when they rhyme. Though once in a while you don't have to do that. So I've been doing a lot of that.
Yeah, I always wonder when you're forced. Like when I wrote that stupid thing at the beginning, it was all about the rhyme, but it doesn't always fit. I don't know how they. I like, I was listening to Eminem. I forget the name of that. They played at the Academy Awards, and his
Lose Yourself.
You lose yourself. Oh my God! When he really
so good.
The rhymes and they're convoluted rhymes. I mean, but it's so satisfying when it comes out. You know, it goes round and round and.
Yeah.
No, I memorized one poem recently because I was asked to do this for the women's club. They have a Christmas thing, and it was the Robert Frost, whose woods these are. I think I know. His house is in the village snow. He will not see me stopping here.
I can't believe you memorized
As his woods fill up with snow, my little horse must think it queer without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, darkest evening of the year, he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound's the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have something to keep. I promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep and miles to go before I sleep.
Isn't that lovely? That's that iambic pentameter.
Is that
right?
okay?
Yeah. You know, to that da 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 da, which is like very much like a heartbeat. It's very and you write haiku because you've written a couple.
No, I did to you as a joke. I mean, to see if I could do something, but I've never written one. Yes, great.
Orange hair, spiked tie, red lipstick smeared, all askew, stuck in my nightmares.
Woo!
Wow. I thought you were talking about someone else for a second, but you know what I'm talking about.
Well, maybe she was.
You don't have to tell me. That last line might apply.
Yes, yes. Wow. Well,
okay, Miggs.
That's so great.
What do you want? What's your subject?
Oh, I was gonna just like about a podcast.
Podcast, okay.
Which is pretty generic. I don't know.
One time I heard Paul McCartney say about lyrics, he goes, we just make up crap.
Right.
And people just read into it. I mean, sometimes obviously from their songs, it makes sense, it's a story, but sometimes you go, especially Sgt. Pepper album, there's just like random things. And he says, we just make up stuff. And when I realized that was a great thing to hear because, and the Stones sometimes, because I sing a lot of their songs, you realize like just make up as long as it sounds interesting,
right?
And it comes together, and it doesn't have to be exactly so. What's the word? Literal.
Well, anyway, we have a few seconds left, but so whenever you're ready, we'll just wait. We'll finish. It'll be a perfect finish for this.
Okay.
No pressure.
No pressure, but do it now.
No, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We tell our airwave tales, sending our messages out talk in vibrations.
Oh, okay. What a perfect ending. So we're all done.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Diane
That was
Lowman,
fun.
Poet Laureate.
Thank you.
Yep.